Hello, 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 and welcome back to our Finding Better podcast. My name is John Suzuki, and I am your host. And we're going to talk about something that is really, really current in the news and in business today. And so, I just want a quick reminder that if anything in this podcast resonates with you, share it. Share it with other people because it's all about sharing experiences. It's not about sharing theories or concepts or academics. Jonathan Stutz, who's joining me today, is going to share with you his actual experiences so that you might be able to learn from those experiences and apply them to your own life. Jonathan Stutz, welcome to Finding Better. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, unbelievable. I'm so excited to talk with you about your new book. And I see that you have your book right there, Daily Practices of Inclusive Leaders. And it's on Amazon. And again, folks, this is not a commercial to sell Jonathan's book. Okay, Jonathan is going to share some of the main concepts and experiences that you can take away. And if you want to learn more about what Jonathan is talking about and more about his experiences, then you can buy his book. But you will get value out of this episode for sure, for sure, for sure. So, Jonathan, congratulations on launching your book.
Thank you. Thanks very
Did,
much. It's been
did you have
really
fun?
exciting.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a little bit surreal. We had 150 people up at Third Place Books in Lake Forest Park for the launch event. Tyra Majors from Como interviewed us on stage, and we did our first signing. It was really a lot of fun, and
that's awesome.
yeah, really fun.
That's wonderful. So the name of your book is Daily Practices of Inclusive Leaders. So let's set that aside for now, because
Okay.
I want to talk about you. I want to talk about your experiences and the experiences that you had that led you to get into this world of training people
Hmm.
about inclusivity and what that means. And we'll just go from there.
Great, great. Yeah, I was born in Toronto, Canada, which is considered one of the most diverse cities in the world.
Mm,
We had people in our lives from all over the world, and but at a very young age, I was just 5. We moved to Atlanta, Georgia, during the height of the civil rights movement, and I experienced a very different world down there. I'm Jewish and Canadian American,
hmm.
and the South in the late '60s was quite segregated, a lot of discrimination, a lot of hate, anti-Semitism, racism.
Right.
And I experienced that. I experienced it on the playground. I experienced it in rides to Pop Warner football with my friends' parents and hearing language that I wasn't familiar with or knew as a small kid. And it wasn't what was spoken in my home. I came from a background where we really recognized people's differences and equity and justice, and my family worked towards those issues. And so that led me on a path that, years later, as I came into professional life, we moved to Seattle when I was 10, the Mercer Island, grew up there. I've always been fascinated with leaders and leadership and social justice just from how I was raised.
Hmm.
There's a Jewish value of tikkun olam, it means literally to repair the world. And that's the concept, the philosophy that you brought into this world, and you have a responsibility to make it a better place before you leave. So those philosophies and concepts really stuck with me.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. You know, what you just said is the whole reason for this podcast, right? It's all about I believe, and I've said this before 1,000 times, I believe that we all have a common purpose and a shared purpose, and that is to make the world better than the day we landed on it.
Absolutely.
And that's what you just said. Going
Yeah.
back to your childhood real quick, you'd mentioned that you know you'd experienced lots of racism and so forth. I would imagine that a big part of you wasn't just about how people treated you, but how people treated other people in the South
Yeah.
during those days, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was very young, but it kind of planted a seed.
Absolutely.
And then as I studied political science and leadership and was a student of leaders, I realized that leaders can have a tremendous effect on people and individuals. And so it led me to study political science at the University of Washington. I ended up getting a master's in organizational leadership at City University of Seattle. And I worked in roles where I was working with people of all different backgrounds and cultures and races and, genders. And so I learned a lot along the way. That, what I came to understand from my experiences growing up and studying leadership is that inclusive leadership is leadership. This idea of creating cultures where everybody feels they belong is
Yes.
central to creating high performing, highly effective teams, because you need all hands on deck to to solve these problems and to challenges and achieve goals of organizations. You want everybody contributing at a high level.
Right, right. And the whole concept of belonging is so important, and it's so central to the human being, if you
Mm-hmm.
will, right? Now, one of the things, the whole world of diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? It's just this thing out there. Not a thing. You could call it whatever you want. I get it. I understand what's behind it. The thing that frustrates me a lot is the execution of it, right? And uh, what we're being taught, how we're being taught how we need to behave. We're taught how we need to, um, uh, uh, frankly, judge people by the way they look. And I found myself in a situation where people were trying to be really sensitive to me, but they were trying to be sensitive to me because I'm Asian. And I'm like, I don't judge me because I'm Asian. Judge me for the person I am. Now, the thing that you focus on in your book is inclusivity as it relates specifically to leadership. And that one word, belonging, that there's a lot to unpack in that one word. Tell us about what that means uh, and how you have applied it in your career and how you're
Sure.
teaching it.
Sure. Well, belonging to me is where each individual feels seen, heard, valued, and understood. And so instead of just seeing you as this umbrella Asian
Right,
because of how you look, that is a default for someone who hasn't taken the time to get to know you as an
right,
individual and to spend the time to hear your story and how you grew up and who influenced you and what's important to you and your values and what your interests are. And just in our conversation over the last month or two, how much I've learned more and more about you and who you are as a person. I don't see you as this you know, umbrella of Asian. I've learned a lot
right.
about your Japanese American heritage in your book, and and just so this is what we're talking about in creating a culture of belonging. It's where leaders and actually coworkers and colleagues spend the time to go deeper. And we talk about our diversity tree, and the diversity tree is this idea that there's what you can see, the visible dimensions of diversity, which is what's in the leaves and the branches of the tree.
Hmm.
But then what is in the roots of the tree are the invisible dimensions of all of us. And we
Right.
encourage leaders to spend the time to get to know their people at a deeper level, to surface those invisible dimensions so they see them as individuals and not some narrow stereotype based on a perception. So when you talk about creating a culture of belonging in the workforce, it's really to see the person as who they are, listen to them, understand their unique experiences and their perspectives that is different from others, and apply those, and encourage them to speak up and speak out about their opinions and ideas. So belonging is
Wonderful.
really this really important concept of inclusion. That if leaders can have inclusive leadership traits, they can these daily practices that can create an inclusive environment. But feeling that you belong is something that the employees or members of the organization or team feel, right? So a
And
leader
that's
can be an inclusive leader, but what you feel is you feel you belong, and that's something that you're working towards as an inclusive leader. But it's something how people experience it.
and it really takes work. It really takes work to do that. I love the analogy of the tree because the roots are the invisible part of the tree that nobody sees. But you know what? If those roots aren't there, that tree's not there, right? And
Absolutely.
it is so important. Um, I want to share with you a kind of a reverse situation that I experienced when I was in high school. So, being Asian and wearing glasses, I looked smart, right? So I
Yeah.
remember going into an oceanography class, and I walk into the class the very first day, and everybody turns around, looks at me, and they go, "Oh my God, there goes the curve," right? And I
Oh
just
my
looked at
gosh.
and I looked at them, and I'm like, "You guys have no idea." Right? But by the end of the class, I mean, people were high fiving me, going, "John, thanks for bringing the curve down."
Oh
And
my
so,
God.
but they looked at me and they're like, "Oh God, there's a smart guy. He's Asian. He studies all the time." No, that wasn't me, but that was a judgment that
You
they
mean you're
made.
not good at math? You mean what?
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm not. And so, so anyway, had they hired me, right, because of the way I look, they would have been devastated. They would have just been so sorely disappointed.
Right, right, right.
But so what are some of the things that you talk about in terms of, you know, daily practices? I love that because in my mind that means simple, right? But
Right.
what are some examples of folks of practices that people
Yeah.
can
Well, the first thing
exercise?
I got to approach is that you said that, this is a lot of hard work getting to this culture of belonging. But the thing is that it's not two or three big things or one big thing that you
Right.
do to create that culture of belonging. The beauty of it is it's very practical. They're little things, easy things to include in what you're already doing. So building these daily practices into the rhythm of the business, whether it's recruiting or hiring or talent development or talent management, promotions. These are little things that you can do as part of what you're already doing to start building this culture of belonging. And it's not something you have to do every day. Maybe you do it 2 or 3 times a day, or 2 or 3 times a week, I should say. They can be just little nudges.
So
So
the
to give,
little tweaks. They're
yeah,
not. I mean, we're not talking about moving mountains and boulders.
right, right. So they're little additions. So let's say you're doing recruiting, right? And so it's the idea of casting the nets wider, not just posting the jobs on LinkedIn, but maybe reaching out to professional technical organizations that focus on, the LGBTQ plus community or Black community, or, just where are they spending their time? There's something called the Black MBAs Association or the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. These are organizations that are professional development organizations that bring people together that have common community, and so reaching out to them and building relationships, offering speakers, sponsoring their events, so that when they're looking for jobs, they think of your company. That's a little thing you can do as far as outreach, right?
So when you talked about those things, what struck me was that is largely about diversity as well, right?
Yes,
Driving diversity. But the inclusion part of it and the belonging part of it applies to everybody. It doesn't
absolutely.
matter what race you are, it doesn't matter what sex you are, it doesn't matter who you are.
Right.
And one of the things about this podcast that has been really, really wonderful, and it's been such a gift to me because it's about finding better and it's about sharing experiences, right? And one of the things that I found, I remember sitting at LAX one day, and I was just people watching. I'm just watching these hundreds of people go back and forth, and I realized that there wasn't a single person I was looking at that couldn't teach me something.
Mhm.
Right. Even the 5-year-old kids, right? I mean, they have something they could teach me. And so with this podcast, I invite everybody, right? If you have an experience that you've gone through that you want to that you think would help other people to understand, it's wonderful.
Right.
Now, and along those lines, you worked for a long time at Microsoft. And one thing I know about Microsoft is that they really, really have taken to heart this idea of inclusion, this idea of diverse thinking, the idea that everybody, anybody, and the more diverse thinking that they can get, the better they are. And they're just amazing as a company. Can you talk about that just a little bit in terms of your experience with Microsoft and what
Yeah, absolutely.
what they do?
Well, I mean, even today, dealing with artificial intelligence, which, Microsoft's leading the way in this space, they're dealing with some of the most complex, difficult problems that you can be, because basically they're adaptive learning problems. They're problems that no one person has the answer because it's a
Right,
new area. They're
right,
they're they're forging a new path, a new trail. So it's super challenging. And what's really critical is that to solve these problems, whether they're legal, they're privacy related, personal data, just some of the issues with bad actors misusing AI. So to do that, you really need to have a team that represents, lots of different experiences and knowledge. So companies like Microsoft, when we've been dealing with some of these tough challenges, we'll work to ensure that we have this inclusive culture by starting with, like I said, recruiting. So you're bringing in people from around the world, around the globe that understand some of the issues and cultures and different culture perspectives of how these technologies are being developed and how they're applied. But also, like when you're interviewing, one of the daily practices is to make sure that the panel of interviewers has that diversity. Because if you want to have a diversity of your team, you want to make sure there are people on the panel of interviewers that represent the communities in which we live,
absolutely.
work, and play, so that when people apply, they're not seeing this homogeneous, panel. They see people that look like them, so they feel like, oh, okay, I'm going to fit in here because there's people that are making decisions that actually look like me, or they see leadership that actually looks like them because they see that there's people up like them up in higher ranks of the
Right,
organization.
right.
So those are a couple things, but also just these little, what I call micro opportunities. You're walking down the hall, and this is what you're talking about, where everybody, applies to everybody, no matter your race or gender or, sexual orientation, that you're walking down the hall and you see somebody, you nod or say hello if you can, just acknowledging them, see them and see their presence makes people feel good that the leader is acknowledging them. And
Right.
it's a little thing, but the funny thing is that when you're not part of the dominant culture, when you're what they call an only one, you're the only person with a disability on the team, you're the
Mm-hmm.
only military vet on the team, whatever the diversity dimension is, if you're what they call an only one, then it's harder for you to feel you fit in, that you belong.
Sure.
So the leader acknowledging you, asking for your opinion, your ideas, and including you in meetings, having you shadow them, makes people feel more connected. And
Absolutely.
when you feel more connected, you're going to be more motivated, more loyal. You're going to feel more comfortable sharing your opinion without worry about being scrutinized or ostracized in some way, that you feel safe, what they call psychologically safe, to share. And you'll actually be open to learning more too. So you're a more productive employee, and this applies to everybody.
And that's what leaders want, right? I mean, that's what leaders want.
Absolutely.
I had I had a guest on on my show, if you will. His name was John Gray, and young man, one of the most amazing leaders that I've ever met. The guy looks like he just graduated from college. But anyway, he said to me, he says, that I asked him, what's the secret to success? He goes, you got to care. You got to
Mm,
care. You got to
yeah.
care about your people. You got to care about them. You got to care about what they want. You got to care about their goals. And that really struck me because I've always lived my life with my customers and my employees and my everybody, that they don't care
Mm-hmm.
how much you know until they know how much you care.
Right. And
And I think,
caring
yep,
is another, synonym for caring is empathy.
right,
And we
right,
talk in the book about empathy is the path to inclusion, and inclusion is the path to belonging.
wonderful.
So it all begins with caring and empathy
Yeah, yeah,
and your willingness to, not necessarily, I don't necessarily like the phrase like put yourself in somebody else's shoes, but because you'll never be able to, I'll never be able to experience life that you've had, right? I can't
right,
put myself in
right,
your shoes,
and
but
vice versa. Every one
right,
of
but
us,
right,
exactly.
but I can hear your story. I can
Yep,
ask questions. I can
yep,
listen and learn
yep,
and appreciate and empathize.
yep. And to that point, Jonathan, I just want to share this, is that, listening is really important. But one just last week, I had this massive epiphany. It was a life epiphany, and that was presence. And I heard somebody say, that being present is very important. And I came to the conclusion after thinking about this and thinking about this that the greatest gift you can give somebody is your presence. Presence, Presence,
Hmm.
not gifts,
Yes.
but it is a gift. And the thing I want to encourage my entire audience as it relates to what you're doing, Jonathan, is to think about when is the last time that you spent 5 minutes with a person and you turned everything off. You
Mm.
turned you just you were there, you were listening, you turned off your screens, you turned off your phone, you turned off your computer. You didn't have it. If you're in a place and you have people trying to interrupt you, you didn't let them do it. You were present for
Yeah.
that individual. When's
And
the
we,
last time? And when
yeah.
I've talked to people, nobody has said anything other than, boy, I can't remember. And so when you think about it, and when you think about yourself, think about that part of it. And my
Hmm.
epiphany came when I decided that I was going to laser beam my grandson.
Mm.
And he's always come. They're all. I got two of them. I got three of them now, just as of Monday. But anyway, they would come to me, and you got all this stuff going on, and I can't understand them anyway. And they say, "Papa, Papa, this, and Papa, Papa, that." And so I decided last week that I was going to just be there.
Hmm.
And my one of my grandsons, my youngest grandson, came up to me, and he's 4 years old. He can barely speak a full sentence. Um, every eighth word was poo poo. And he says, "Yeah, Papa, in the tree there was poo poo, and then the tree was green with poo poo, and I mean everything was just poo poo." But I listened, and I was present, and I listened to every single word. And boy, the more he's talking, the more I listened, the more animated he got.
Yeah.
And the more he talked, and the more then his big brother came in and he wanted to be part of it. And then
It's
my
great.
wife and my daughter and her husband came in and they were present. And the most wonderful part about that we've learned is as much as a wonderful gift it is that we gave to them, the real gift was what came back to
Yeah.
us,
Yeah.
because that's a moment I'm never going to forget.
Right. Right. That's
And
very
that is
cool.
that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so if you can practice that, if you
Yeah.
can practice 1 minute,
I'll tell you.
start with one
Yeah.
minute with an
I'll tell you a great
employee.
story.
Yeah.
I was doing a training in Denver, Colorado for Amazon, and a gentleman told the story about how he had their senior more manager for the region coming into town, and he wanted to meet with him. This guy was a mid-level manager, but not a senior manager. And he wanted to meet with him, and he asked for 15, 20 minutes of time with this guy coming in.
Uh-huh.
And he walked into the room, and he wasn't used to this, right? Because everybody, is in tech is like crazy busy. They've got their cell phones
Right.
going, emails are
Right.
coming in rapidly. This guy's dealing with emergencies left and right. The guy takes his cell phone off the table, puts it in his bag. He closes his laptop, and he looked at the guy and said, how can I help you? I'd love to talk to you. Tell me more about yourself, et cetera. So this is an example of presence. He physically took the phone. He could have just left the phone there and not looked at it.
Right.
He
Right.
physically took the phone off the table. He closed his laptop and leaned in and had the conversation with the gentleman and gave him, the amount of time that he had asked for to get to know him and answer his questions and be with him.
Yeah.
Um, when you
That's
experience
amazing.
that, it is remarkable. And yet, I know in the book, I talk about an experience where, unfortunately, it was the opposite, where
Right.
there was a director I was meeting with. I only met with her once a quarter for a half hour. I came in, she was looking at her phone. She actually turned and looked at her email at one point. She looked at her watch at another point. And finally, I just said, hey, if this is not a good time for you, if you're dealing with an emergency, no problem. Let's reschedule, but I only have a half hour with you once a quarter. So let's make sure that, you have the time to really, spend with me where you're not, distracted.
Good for you.
And I had to do that because it was so unnerving. And I wanted to be respectful of her. If she was dealing with an emergency, let her deal with it and don't feel obligated to meet with me.
And you know what that also communicates to a lot of people? Maybe not everybody, but that she has higher priorities than you.
Yes.
Meaning not higher priorities than you have, that you are not at the top of her priority list.
That's right.
And that to me that's being pretty disrespectful. But I
Yeah.
understand it. You have to understand it, right? Because we are living in a world of multitasking.
Right.
And people, I hear it all the time, how people are proud to be multitaskers. But when you do that, you are in fact taken away from your presence.
Yes.
And the inclusivity, they don't get, it's all about love. I
Yeah.
mean, that sounds crazy, but it
Yeah.
really is. It's all
No, it's
about
true.
people.
We
So
talk in
yeah.
the book about microaggressions, micro invalidations, micro insults. It was all that. And what happens is when that happens, it's like a little paper cut. It's not going to make me quit. It's not going to make me, but when those happen regularly to
Over
people,
and over, exactly.
and
You can kill
what's
somebody.
interesting is it happens more frequently to people that are in the minority, they're the underrepresented, those have historically been marginalized or oppressed, not part of the dominant culture. They tend to
Yep.
experience those types of micro inequities more frequently. And what happens is they become demotivated, their morale drops, they aren't as creative because they are shutting down. And then what happens is they're put on the performance improvement plan and start to get pushed out the door. And when reality, it was the manager that was not present, not
Yeah.
respecting
Yeah.
them, not
Yeah.
not creating that inclusive culture. And what we would do in the environments I worked with at Microsoft and Amazon is we would look at the data. And if we looked at what we called regretted attrition and unregretted attrition, and unregretted attrition are those people that weren't performing well that we needed to manage out. And we would look to see if there was a trending that certain managers had more unregretted attrition. And
Right.
then we looked at it
Right.
by the data we had, which was by race and gender, disability, veterans, et cetera, and even intersectionalities of those, like Black women, for example, were they experiencing the workforce differently by that management or that team? And that would help us understand if we actually had a leadership development challenge rather than
Right.
an
An
employee
employee
development
problem.
challenge.
Yeah. 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 You know, I want to switch gears just for a second here. Um, you know, I one of the things that has always caused me a little bit of not grief or concern, but just one of those things that maybe go, and that is with this trend of DEI and all this kind of stuff. Um, what about the dominant culture? What about uh, white men,
Yeah,
right?
for
And
sure.
and I asked this because I remember my wife, and she was in Microsoft, and she was
For
a
a long time.
principal.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was a principal in the network and security area, and she was one of the few women at her level in this part of the company. So she
Mm-hmm.
was always asked to be part of the interview circuit, and she couldn't do it all the time because otherwise that'd be her full-time job.
That's right.
But anyway, I remember her telling me, coming home and saying, you know what, we just had a really interesting experience. Because Microsoft at the time had lots of events for women, lots of events for minorities, and that pendulum was going in that direction. And some of the white guys were going, well, what about us? And I'm obviously not going to mention any names, but my wife told me, she says, and I brought it up to one of the executives, and this woman executive said, and excuse my French, but she said, fuck the white guys. And I said, what? Because one of them said, hey, listen, are there programs like that you guys are offering for women that we can participate in? And that was the response of this executive. So talk to me a little. To me, that was really wrong.
Yeah.
But I understand that there's emotion behind that because I'm not a woman. I could never understand, those feelings, and some feelings which seem apparently pretty visceral feelings.
Mhm.
But what do you do with that?
Yeah. Well, first off, the inclusion, diversity, equity work that we do is about everybody winning. It's about
Everybody,
everybody. And
right,
in fact, this work can't happen without white males and white females and everything in
right,
between.
right,
Like there there are studies going back to the 50s that diverse teams outperform homogeneous teams time and time again. The empirical data shows that diverse teams succeed. Now, maybe not initially because there's more debate, more discussion. And when you have a team that's homogeneous, they're going to come to a decision faster
right,
because they're
right.
all thinking the same way, the more of group think generally.
Yes,
But the diverse team, once gelled, will be more creative, more innovative, and will come up with a better answer. Interestingly enough, the studies show that they're not as confident as their answer because of that debate and discussion. They're not sure it's right, but in the end, it actually is a higher quality answer. And the diverse team will be the homogeneous team will have higher confidence in their answer, even though it's not as good because they all agreed very quickly, right?
amazing. Yeah, that's
So
really
that's
interesting.
fascinating. So the other thing is that like diversity, or excuse me, white males are not neutral. Neutral is, white is not a neutral color. You know, the diversity of our teams includes white males as well, and that's only two dimensions of their diversity, right?
Right,
There are
right,
many
right,
more, but we must acknowledge that white males specifically, are generally leading organizations in high percentages. Any
right.
organization, government, nonprofit, profit, it's still to this day a high percentage of those organizations are led by white males. But when they create those high performing teams, those highly effective teams, and those they're winning, they are winning as well. They're getting the promotions, they're getting the raises, they're getting the opportunities to take on new work. So they definitely succeed, and they succeed from tapping into the diverse perspectives of the team that they're leading. So everybody wins. And, there's just not, but I must say also that there is two things. First, that the narrative around inclusion, diversity, equity has been hijacked. The narrative that's out there today is that if a black man wins, then a white man is going to lose. And that's just not the case. This is about a rising tide lifts all boats. Everybody benefits.
Right. I love that term that you just used, that has been hijacked.
So,
And
yeah,
when you said that's exactly what I was trying to say earlier on, in
right.
terms of my frustration with
Because
um,
it's not what it's about. It's about everybody winning. It's
right,
about creating a culture where, like you said, it's a culture of love where everybody feels connected. They feel they belong. It's a you've got my back, I've got your back
right,
environment. Um, the other thing is that, and this is tough because to be a diversity professional, you don't need to go through the rigors that a physician goes through to get a board certified, accreditation,
hmm,
or an accountant to pass a CPA,
right,
right?
right,
Anybody
right,
who
right.
wants to read a few books and
That's
take a class or two, there's even certifications out there, but it doesn't mean you can, there's the academic aspect of it, but then there's the lived experience. And there is a body of knowledge to study and learn. It's just that there's a lot of folks out there that are what I'd say are performing malpractice. They are misapplying the
another
work.
great word. Malpractice, and yeah.
So that combination, kind of muddies the water. And then you have a political right that is attacking DEI and really focusing on the aspect of DEI being this false narrative around what it's about.
Hmm, hmm. Yeah, so I am so thank you, Jonathan. I mean you're writing this book, and you're taking the time and effort to kind of clear the air with it, because everything that you said, Jonathan, makes sense to me. It does. Now, um, do I represent the world? No, but I represent me. And it's all about love. It all comes back to caring about people, and sincerely caring about them, and having two ears, one mouth, live your life that way. You
That's
know,
right.
so listen,
Absolutely.
because
Well, it's these little things that you can do every day to help create a more inclusive culture where everybody feels they belong. And in the book, we follow the employee life cycle, going through what are these little simple, easy practices you can apply at each point as you're, in your organization, whether you're leading the organization, you're a DEI professional, you're just passionate about this work. They're simple, practical, and easy to apply. I think folks will enjoy reading it, and things that they can apply even in their community, right?
I was just going to say, right? I mean, the things that we're talking about and the things that you're teaching are things that you can use in your family, right?
Yes.
Your family and your communities, and it's all about people.
I'll give you a quick one that people love. It's called the pause button. And
Ooh.
we need a mechanism when we're having conversations and something strikes us as just not right. It's just inappropriate or offensive in some way. And to interrupt the conversation can be awkward at times, especially in a group situation. And so we've introduced this idea of the pause button, where in the culture, you have everybody understand what the pause button is. And that's that if you hear something that you want to stop and have a conversation about, you say, hey, I'm going to hit the pause button. And right there, people know it's an indicator that we're going to stop and have a conversation about something that was said, inappropriate. Maybe it was, the intent was positive, but the impact was negative and affected somebody, made them feel bad. And so, or you pick up on somebody in the room who was interrupted and you say, hey, I'm going to hit the pause button. It seems like every time, the women speak, they get talked over or they get interrupted. And we should acknowledge that we're missing out on their views and their opinions. So let's try and improve upon that in the future and allow, Sally to finish saying what she was saying. And then we'll come over to, John and hear his thoughts too, because that's valuable as well. What happens is that's a pebble being dropped. It's a little ripple that's created in the water. And then you go to your next meeting, and as you're observing that and you hear somebody else getting interrupted, you can say, hey, I'm going to hit the pause button. And so by modeling these positive behaviors, you then create ripples that other people will model and drop pebbles. And these ripples turn to waves. And that creates the wave of impact of changing the culture, that we're going to be more respectful of people. And the pause button is a very easy tool to implement to have these conversations in the moment.
I love that. I love that. And because, it'd be weird if I'm in a meeting and I see something and I just go, I'm going to hit a pause button, and nobody knows what that is.
Yeah.
Right. But you're making that part of the team dynamic.
Exactly.
Right. And you're saying, guys, I'm going to hit the pause button on this.
Yeah.
And then everybody knows what that means. I love it. And yeah.
It's not just a diversity thing. It can be used like you're in a meeting and they're making a really important decision, and you're seeing that there's somebody that's really knowledgeable and critical to the meeting that isn't there. And you could say, hey, I'm going to hit the pause button. We're having this discussion, but we really need, Joaquin here, because Joaquin has a lot of knowledge and expertise in this situation.
I love that. I love that. And and what that also does when you're in a meeting format is that it gives again, it's a leadership thing. It's a leadership opportunity, right? Because the pause button gets hit and people are going to turn to the leader. And if the leader's going, I can't believe they hit the stupid pause button, but if the leader leans into it and says, okay, what you got, right? Then that helps that ripple.
Absolutely. And the leaders pick it up, or leaders start it. Leadership can start it and have it become that something everybody knows is a common dynamic that we use in the culture here.
That's wonderful. And thank you, Jonathan. I mean, that's something, boom, everybody can make part of their team dynamic. And I take it that your book it includes more of those things.
Absolutely. Yeah. We have one quick one called the Smarty goals. You've heard of SMART goals. SMART is, specific, goals. Measurable, achievable, time relevant and time bound. Yep. We've added Smarty goals, which means when you're setting your goals, you make sure they're inclusive and equitable. So you look at your goals through a lens of making sure that it's going to be inclusive of everybody's needs and it's going to be fair. And so it's just another way to remind folks.
That's a whole new lens. I mean, just as you were talking about it, I just thought, holy smoke, that would really add a very interesting and very different dynamic and perspective on goal setting, potentially.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, all right, Jonathan, this has been amazing. Folks, remember the pause button. Remember the Smarty goals. Remember presence. Remember they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And we talked about a lot of things. Jonathan, anything else you'd like to share as we close
No, it's
out?
great. Thank you. You can check out our website,
Yes,
inclusivepebbles.com, and to learn more about the book and to order it if you like.
inclusivepebbles.com. And yeah, check it out, folks. Check it out on Amazon. I've got a copy of it. Jonathan Stutz, thank you. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for teaching us some remarkable experiences and perspectives as we try to navigate this world of people.
Thanks, John. Great to be here.
Okay, everybody. I love you. God bless you. Have a great day. Thank you for coming. And see you next time. Bye.